Never open the door you were told to stay away from your whole life. Especially when the person who warned you is dead now, and the silence behind the door feels like it's still breathing. My name's Nick, I'm 31, and for as long as I can remember, my dad had one rule: stay out of the basement. Don't touch it, don't look at it, don't even go near it. The door was always locked with this heavy rust-colored padlock, and the only key hung on a cord he wore under his shirt like it was some kind of metal. He even screwed a little handmade sign to the wood that said, "Danger. Do not open." When I was a kid, I thought maybe it was just wires, chemicals, tools, or whatever other scary adult stuff parents used to keep kids away. But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't about safety. Something about the way my dad hovered near the door told me he was guarding more than old junk. Sometimes late at night I'd wake up to faint noises, like heavy footsteps, or a low hum, like a generator deep underground. At dinner the kitchen would sometimes smell faintly of oil and rust, the way a mechanic's shop smells after hours. My dad would disappear for hours dressed in his work overalls, and he'd come back before dawn, muttering to my mom not to turn on the lights because it ruined his eyes. He ran our house with rules that no other kid's parents had. Don't open the curtains after 10. Don't answer if somebody knocks on the back door. Don't pick up the phone if the number was blocked. Don't go to neighbors without telling him first. There was even a handwritten list stuck to the fridge with a magnet, every line starting with the word never. To me, he was strict, maybe paranoid. To him, I guess it was normal. But now, looking back, it feels like it was the prologue to a nightmare. I remember the basement door from when I was little. It was just a plain wooden door, low enough that Dad had to duck a bit to walk through, with two fat steel hinges and that padlock that always felt colder than the rest of the metal in the house. Sometimes, if I crouched down and peered at the gap under the door, I'd see a faint reddish glow, like a dying light bulb. And sometimes, if I pressed my ear close enough, I could hear that steady hum, vibrating in my chest. When I was 10, I finally gave in to curiosity. I touched the lock, just to see if it really was as cold as I thought. My dad was behind me before I even realized he was home. He grabbed me by the shoulders, spun me toward the wall, and in this quiet, trembling voice told me that if I ever touched that door again, he'd move us into the garage and I'd lose everything: my bed, my books, my friends. His voice was calm, but his fingers shook. And in that moment, I understood something I'd never seen before. He wasn't just angry. He was afraid. Not of me, but of what would happen if I went inside. To everyone else, he was just the friendly neighborhood mechanic. The guy with magic ears who could tell what was wrong with a car by listening to the engine once. Neighbors respected him. On weekends he grilled burgers and laughed too loud in horse rings for everyone. But inside our house, he was a different man. Quiet, restless, checking locks 3 times, unplugging the TV whenever commercials came on, standing at the window as if somebody was always out there watching. When I was 13, I found a set of old keys in the garage. Late one night I snuck to the basement door, shaking so hard I could barely fit the key in the hole. The first one didn't work. The second didn't. On the third, the lock gave a little click and I swear I felt a rush of cold air brush across my face, like something breathing from inside. Before I could even turn it, Dad was there. He didn't yell. He just sat me down right there on the stairs, put a heavy hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "The basement is for grown-up things. You'll have plenty of secrets when you're older. But if you care about your mother, stay away." He didn't speak to me for almost 2 weeks after that. Dinner was silent. He left early and came home late. And at night, I heard the hum again under the floor, saw that strip of red light leaking through the crack. When I turned 18, I asked him straight out what was in the basement. He stared at me for a long time, then said, "You're not ready." That was it. End of discussion. Life went on that way until the morning everything ended. My dad dropped dead from a heart attack. Just like that, 4:20 a.m., collapsed at the kitchen table where he kept his notebooks and stacks of bills. The funeral was packed. Half the town came. Guys from the shop walked in pairs, some crying, some cracking jokes to keep it together. My mom clutched the edge of the pew like the ground itself might swallow her. After that, the house was too quiet. No late-night patrols. No muttering about the windows. No hum under the floorboards. For the first time, the silence felt wrong. On the third day, I found the key. But it wasn't a normal key. It wasn't even on the chain around his neck. It was this flat piece of metal, about the size of an old hotel keycard but heavier, with a rectangular cutout near the top. I found it in a secret pocket sewn into the lining of his work jacket, the one still hanging in the garage. Along with it was a folded sheet of graph paper, my dad's handwriting scrawled across it. "If you're reading this, it means you don't have a choice anymore. Don't call anyone. Look for yourself first." I just stood there in the garage, staring at the note, feeling my stomach drop. What did he mean, don't call anyone? Call who? Why? And look for yourself at what? That evening, I showed the key and note to my mom. She went pale, her hands flattening against the table as if she needed to anchor herself. She whispered, "He always said the day would come." I asked her what day. She closed her eyes and said one word I'll never forget. The basement. The next morning I woke up before sunrise, no alarm, just this heavy feeling pressing me out of bed. The house felt hollow without Dad. Every creak in the floor sounded louder, every shadow stretched too far. And that door at the end of the hall looked like it was waiting. I held the strange key in my hand. It was cold, heavier than it should have been, almost like it carried weight that wasn't just metal. The padlock was still hanging from the latch on the basement door, thick and scratched from years of use. I slid the key toward it, but there was no place to put it. No grooves, no hole that matched. For a second I thought maybe I'd been wrong, maybe it was for something else. Then I noticed a small, dull square plate screwed into the doorframe, almost hidden beneath one of the hinges. Right in the middle was a thin vertical slit. My hand shook as I slid the metal card against it. The padlock gave a sharp click and swung open on its own. I froze, listening. Nothing but silence, but it wasn't the kind of silence that made you relax. It was the kind that makes your ears ring because something feels missing. The door creaked when I pulled it open, and the first thing that hit me was the smell, cold, damp, but with something sharp under it, like burnt wires mixed with something sweet and sour, almost chemical. I turned on my phone's flashlight and stepped onto the first stair. They were old wooden steps, worn smooth in the center from decades of use. On the third one the right edge was pressed down harder than the left, as if someone had always walked leaning against the rail. By the sixth, a nail stuck out where the board had cracked and been half-fixed. The further I went, the louder the sound became, the hum I'd heard my whole life but never this clearly. It wasn't just a noise. It was steady, mechanical, like something rotating below the floor. And with it came a glow, faint at first, then stronger, a red pulse seeping across the concrete at the bottom of the stairs. I reached the landing and finally saw the basement for what it was. The front half looked ordinary, shelves lined with dusty jars, old tools, boxes stacked up to the ceiling. But behind a thick concrete wall there was another door. Not wood this time. Steel. It had rivets along the frame, like it belonged on a bank vault, and right in the center was a small hatch door you could slide open, the kind you'd expect to see on a submarine. Etched into the surface in big block letters was one word, journal. My breath caught. Why would a basement door be labeled like that? I stepped closer, heart hammering in my chest, and slid open the little hatch. Red light spilled out, bathing my face. And on the wall opposite the door, in neat rows held by thumbtacks, were photographs. Not family pictures. Not vacations or birthdays. Random people. Streets. Schoolyards. Parking lots. License plates. Each one with a blue sticky note attached, the time and date written in neat handwriting. And in almost every photo, in the corner of the frame, standing in the shadows, was my father. I stood there frozen, my hand still gripping the edge of that little hatch, staring at the wall like my brain couldn't process what my eyes were telling me. Hundreds of photos. Some printed in black and white, some in faded color, all of them pinned with neat precision. And every single one had that blue sticky note with dates, times, even little abbreviations I didn't recognize. My flashlight shook in my hand. I scanned row after row, kids walking home from school, women carrying groceries, men smoking outside gas stations, parked cars on empty streets. And in so many of them, blurred in the corner or reflected in a window, there was my dad. Not smiling. Not posing. Just standing. Watching. I wanted to believe it was some kind of project, maybe for work, maybe even a hobby that looked creepy out of context. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't random. This was obsession. I pressed against the heavy steel door until it groaned open enough for me to slip inside. The hum was louder now, vibrating through the concrete floor. The red light came from a single industrial bulb hanging from a cord, swinging slightly as if it had been disturbed not long ago. The room beyond wasn't big, but every inch of it was filled. Filing cabinets lined the walls, drawers labeled with initials and dates. A desk sat in the middle, covered in notebooks, each one marked journal with Roman numerals, Journal I, Journal 2, Journal 3, and so on, stacked almost to the ceiling. My dad's handwriting was everywhere, looping and sharp, the same handwriting that had signed my school permission slips and written grocery lists. I pulled open the nearest drawer. Inside were manila folders. Each folder had a name on it. My stomach twisted when I saw some I recognized, neighbors, teachers, even kids I'd gone to school with. Inside were photos, receipts, copies of letters, even scribbled maps with arrows and notes like enters at 7:43 or alone on Thursdays. I slammed the drawer shut and stumbled back, my breath coming too fast. This wasn't just some weird collection. This was surveillance. My dad had been documenting people's lives, every move, every routine, every secret. I reached for one of the journals on the desk and flipped it open. The first page made my blood run cold. Subject, Diane. My mom. The entry described what she wore on certain days, who she called on the phone, when she went grocery shopping. It was written clinically, like he was studying her. Like she wasn't his wife, but just another subject to monitor. I flipped further, my name was there too. Notes about what time I left for school, which friends I visited, even what I wrote in my notebooks. He had tracked me my whole life. For a moment I thought I might throw up right there on the concrete floor. My entire childhood, all the rules, all the fear, it wasn't about protecting us. It was about control. About him watching, recording, making sure no one ever stepped out of the lines he drew. And then, in the back of the journal, I saw something worse. A name I didn't recognize. Next to it, not just times and dates, but words scrawled in bold, removed. Status, complete. I froze on that word. Removed. It wasn't written like an accident. It wasn't scribbled in anger. It was underlined. Marked. Final. I flipped back a few pages, scanning frantically through the journal. Most entries looked the same: timestamped notes, observations about daily habits, where people went, who they met. But every once in a while, there it was again, removed. Status, complete. The dates chilled me. Some went back 20 years. Some were as recent as a few months ago. Different names, different people. None I recognized at first. I shoved the journal aside and yanked open another filing cabinet drawer, searching. More folders. More names. Inside each one, photos, receipts, scribbled diagrams of neighborhoods, routes to schools, workplaces. Some had sticky notes in red instead of blue. And on those, the same word, removed. I don't know how long I stood there flipping through file after file, my hands shaking worse each time. Finally, one name stopped me cold. A girl I'd gone to school with. Her photo was there, smiling, standing outside the library. I remembered her. She'd gone missing when we were kids. The whole town searched for weeks. They said she must have run away. But here was my dad's handwriting. Her schedule, her friends, the times she walked home alone. And at the bottom of the file, removed. Status, complete. I staggered back, nearly tripping over a box. My flashlight beam swung across the room, catching on something I hadn't noticed before: a metal shelving unit against the far wall. On it were boxes labeled with single letters. I pulled one down, opened it. Inside weren't photos or papers. Inside were objects. Personal things. A hairbrush. A wallet. A set of keys with a unicorn keychain. Another box held a cracked pair of glasses, a torn backpack strap, an old bracelet with someone's initials scratched on the inside. My mouth went dry. These weren't just things my dad had collected. These were keepsakes. Reminders. Trophies. The hum of the machinery filled the silence, pressing against my skull until I thought I'd scream. My hands went clammy. My chest felt tight. All I could think was, my dad wasn't just watching people. He was taking them. And if that was true, then the man who raised me, the man the whole town respected, the man who laughed at barbecues and shook hands at church, was a predator. I stumbled back toward the stairs, desperate to get out, to breathe, to think. But just before I left, my flashlight landed on one last box. Smaller than the rest. On the lid was a strip of tape with a single word written in block letters. Nick. I couldn't move at first. My eyes locked on that box, the letters of my name staring back at me in my dad's sharp, blocky handwriting. Nick. Nothing else. No description, no hint at what was inside. Just my name, branded on that cardboard like it was evidence. I told myself not to open it. That I'd already seen enough to wreck a lifetime of memories. But there's something about curiosity when it's laced with fear, it feels almost magnetic. My fingers trembled as I slid the box closer. The cardboard rasped against the metal shelf, loud enough to make my pulse spike. The lid lifted with a dry creak, and inside, at first, it looked harmless. Ordinary. But the longer I stared, the worse it got. There were pieces of me in there. Little fragments of my life that I didn't even know were missing. My first grade report card, edges yellowed, teacher's notes written in cheerful pen about how Nick shows curiosity about the world. My old baseball cap from when I was 10, the one I thought I'd lost at a game. A photo of me on the curb outside our house, maybe 12 years old, tying my shoelace. I didn't remember anyone taking that picture. Underneath those were scraps of notes. Times and dates, written like logs. 7:12 a.m. leaves for school. 12:30 p.m. lunch, alone. 3:47 p.m. back home, hides in room. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. This wasn't a memory box. It wasn't keepsakes. It was a file. My dad had been documenting me the same way he did with strangers. Like I was just another subject. I rifled deeper, my hands sweaty, pages slipping. A folded sheet of paper caught my eye, different than the rest, thicker, written in red pen. I opened it and froze. It was a list. My friends' names. Every single one of the kids I'd grown up with, scribbled down in Dad's tidy handwriting. Beside most of them were notes, influence uncertain or safe for now. But two names had something else written next to them. In that same red ink I'd seen on other files. Removed. Status, complete. My throat tightened. I recognized those names. One kid's family had moved away suddenly. No warning, no goodbye. The other, people said he drowned on a camping trip. Everyone chalked it up to tragedy. But I remembered how strange it felt at the time, like pieces of the story didn't add up. And now here it was, in my father's handwriting, sitting in a box with my name on it. I dropped the paper like it was poison, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of the flashlight. At the bottom of the box was a small envelope. Again, my name scrawled across it. My chest felt like it was caving in as I opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was me. 6, maybe 7 years old. Lying in bed, fast asleep. The photo was taken from the doorway of my bedroom. The angle was unmistakable. Someone had stood there, in the dark, watching me sleep, and snapped the picture. My vision blurred. I stumbled back and nearly knocked over the shelf. My whole childhood reassembled itself in my mind, puzzle pieces clicking into place. All the times I thought my dad was just checking in. The way I sometimes woke in the night and swore I felt someone standing in my doorway. The strict rules. The punishments. The constant surveillance. He hadn't been protecting me. He'd been tracking me. Controlling me. The way he tracked everyone else. My breath came in ragged gasps. My body screamed to get out of that basement, to run until my lungs burst. But just as I turned toward the stairs, something caught my eye on the desk. A cassette tape. Black plastic, label fading with age. But across the front, in the same deliberate block letters, was a message. For N. The cassette tape sat there on the desk like it was waiting for me. Dust clung to the plastic, but the words on the white label were still clear, written in my father's rigid handwriting, for N. For me. I picked it up carefully, like it might shatter in my hand. It felt heavier than a tape should, the kind of weight that isn't physical but psychological. Like whatever was inside it could change everything. My first thought was, how the hell was I supposed to play this thing? Who even had a cassette player anymore? Then I remembered the old stereo Dad kept in the garage. A bulky thing from the 80s, with knobs that stuck in a tape deck he refused to throw out. He said the old stuff was built to last. I shoved the tape into my hoodie pocket, climbed the stairs 2 at a time, and slammed the basement door shut behind me. I locked it, slid the strange keycard back into my pocket, and leaned against the wood, my chest heaving. The silence of the house pressed in, thicker than before. Mom was sitting in the living room, her hands folded in her lap, eyes staring blankly at the muted TV screen. She didn't look up when I entered. Didn't even ask where I'd been. It was like she already knew. I wanted to tell her. To demand answers. To scream. But my throat closed around the words. Instead, I walked straight to the garage, flipped on the single hanging bulb, and dug the stereo out from under a tarp. Dust puffed into the air, coating my tongue. I wiped the deck off, slid the tape in, and pressed play. For a second, there was nothing but static. Then, his voice. Nick. I froze. My heart stuttered. It was him. My dad. His voice filled the garage like he was standing right behind me, low and steady, with that same deliberate cadence he always had when laying down rules. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it long enough to tell you in person. You're older now, old enough to start seeing the truth. Old enough to start understanding why things had to be the way they were. My fingers dug into the workbench, knuckles white. I know what you found downstairs. I know what it looks like. And I know your mind is racing through all the wrong conclusions. But you need to hear this before you decide what kind of man you're going to be. The tape hissed, his breath faintly audible like he was too close to the mic. This family is not what you think. I'm not who you think. The basement isn't a collection. It isn't a hobby. It's the record of a war, Nick. One you were born into, whether you like it or not. My stomach dropped. War? You think I was just watching people? Writing notes like a madman? No. I was tracking them. The ones who don't belong. The ones who've been here too long. They slip into our lives, into our towns, pretending to be like us. But they're not. And when I marked someone removed, it wasn't murder, Nick. It was protection. For you. For your mother. For everyone who doesn't even know they're in danger. I slammed the stop button, my chest burning. It sounded insane. Absolutely insane. My father, the town mechanic, talking about secret wars and removing people like he was some kind of soldier. But the journals. The files. The trophies. The names. None of that looked like protection. And yet, part of me remembered the rules. The paranoia. The way he always checked the windows. The way he said family is sacred. Was it possible, just barely possible, that he believed it? That he thought he was saving us? I pressed play again, my hands shaking. You'll have doubts. That's natural. But sooner or later, you'll see what I saw. You'll feel it. The cracks in the world, where they slip through. And when that day comes, Nick, you'll understand why I kept the records. Why I trained myself to notice. Why I did the things I did. The tape clicked as if he'd leaned closer. And when that day comes, you'll have to decide. Keep the journal alive. Or let them win. The tape went silent. Just the hum of the garage bulb above me. I sat there for a long time, staring at the stereo, his words echoing in my skull. War. Protection. Removal. But the photographs. The objects. The way he cataloged me like I was just another file. If he was telling the truth, then everything I thought I knew about my father, about my childhood, about reality itself wasn't just broken. It was something darker. And if he was lying, then I just inherited the legacy of a madman. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again, hissing through the static of that cassette, keep the journal alive. Or let them win. The words rattled around in my skull like nails in a jar. I kept asking myself if he really believed it, if all those files and photos and trophies were some delusional mission, or if it was just a twisted excuse for something much worse. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. The house felt too small, too quiet. Mom moved around the kitchen like a ghost, pouring coffee into a cup she didn't drink, staring out the window without blinking. She didn't ask me about the basement. She didn't ask me about the tape. It was like she'd already decided she couldn't bear the answers. But I couldn't leave it. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what I'd heard. So I went back down. The air hit me the second I opened the door, cold, damp, sour. The hum was still there, low and constant, vibrating up through the soles of my shoes. My flashlight beam cut across the shelves, the photographs, the endless drawers of files. They looked worse in the daylight. Not just strange, not just obsessive, predatory. Like 1,000 pairs of eyes staring back at me. I forced myself deeper into the second room. The desk was still piled high with journals, notebooks stacked so neatly it made my skin crawl. The red bulb above flickered once, just enough to throw shadows against the wall, and for a second it looked like the faces in the photographs were moving. I tried to focus. I pulled one of the journals at random, flipping to the middle. More logs. More subjects. But this one had details I hadn't seen before. Not just times and dates. Descriptions. Reactions. One line made my throat go dry. Subject 32 knows I am watching. Smiles at me when I pass. Must confirm status soon. I flipped faster. Some entries were written almost like conversations, half sentences scribbled like Dad had been answering voices no one else could hear. Yes, I see him. Yes, I'll handle it. Yes, Nick will learn. My flashlight beam landed on another box shoved beneath the desk. Smaller, taped shut. I pulled it out, tore the tape with shaking hands, and dumped the contents on the floor. Inside were dozens of cassette tapes. Each labeled. Each with initials or single letters. I picked one up, D, my mom. Another, L, a neighbor. Another, P, T. My elementary school teacher. The box was full of voices. I found an old tape recorder on the shelf, dust-caked but functional. My hands trembled as I slid in the tape marked D and pressed play. At first, static. Then, my mom's voice. Clear. Nervous. I don't think he knows yet. He's just a boy. Please, stop writing it all down, it's scaring him. I slammed the stop button. My chest felt like it was collapsing. He hadn't just been watching. He'd been recording. Listening. Collecting their words, their fears, their lives. And then I saw it. A drawer half open, a folder sticking out. I pulled it free, already knowing before I looked. The label said Nick, Phase 2. Inside were notes, pages and pages of them. Plans. Predictions. Words like test, conditioning, transition. And at the bottom, underlined in red. Subject will inherit journal. Must decide. If not, remove. My whole body went cold. I sat on the cold concrete floor, the folder spread open in front of me, the words swimming in my vision like they were alive. Subject will inherit journal. Must decide. If not, remove. It felt like the walls were pressing in, the hum drilling through my skull, vibrating in my teeth. My father hadn't just been cataloging me out of paranoia. He'd been preparing me. Grooming me. Training me to pick up where he left off. And if I didn't? If I didn't play along with his delusions? Then in his mind, I wasn't his son. I was just another subject. Another entry to be crossed out. Another life to be removed. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I'd throw up right there on the basement floor. I shoved the folder away, but the words clung to me, crawling across my skin. I couldn't stop myself. I dug through more drawers, more boxes, desperate for answers. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Some files were marked with codes I couldn't decipher, rows of letters and numbers like case files. Others had maps of neighborhoods I didn't recognize, buildings circled in red ink, arrows pointing to alleys and dead ends. And then there were the names. Pages of them. Whole lists. Some were people I vaguely remembered from town, neighbors who had moved away, classmates whose families suddenly relocated, a mailman who disappeared one summer. Others I didn't recognize at all. Next to some names was a check mark. Next to others, that single word, removed. The sheer number made my hands go numb. It wasn't dozens. It wasn't hundreds. It was thousands. Every journal, every file, every drawer, each one crammed with lives my dad had stalked, dissected, erased. Or, at least, that's what it looked like. But then his voice from the tape came back, whispering like a ghost in my ear, "It's not murder, Nick. It's protection. They're not like us. They've been here too long." My head spun. Which was worse? That my father had been a monster who spent his life destroying innocent people, or that he believed he was fighting some invisible war, and expected me to carry it on? I pushed away from the desk and stumbled toward the wall where the photographs were pinned. My flashlight swept across row after row of faces, eyes staring at me through time. And for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Some of them didn't look right. Not in an obvious way. Not like monsters. But just slightly off. Eyes too wide. Smiles too stiff. Postures too rigid. Like mannequins trying to pass for human. My breath hitched. I blinked, leaned closer, trying to convince myself it was the poor quality of the photos, the red light messing with my vision. But the longer I stared, the more wrong they seemed. I stumbled back, heart racing. Was that what he meant? Was that what he saw? Or was I just starting to lose my mind the way he had? Behind me, the hum seemed louder, stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat through the floor. I turned toward the sound. Toward the far wall. And that's when I noticed something I had missed all this time. A door. Not steel like the first one. Not wood like the upstairs. This one was heavier, smoother, with no handle, just a thick wheel lock like you'd see on a vault. And stenciled above it, in faded paint, were 3 letters. L3. My mouth went dry. If everything I'd seen so far was just level 2, what the hell was in level 3? The vault door loomed in front of me like the mouth of something alive. The paint above it was faded, the letters barely visible in the red light, but the meaning was clear, L3. Level 3. My father hadn't just built a basement. He'd built layers. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. The hum was louder here, more distinct, almost mechanical. But beneath it, I swore I heard something else. Not machinery. Not static. Breathing. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel lock. The metal was greasy, leaving black smears on my palms. It groaned when I turned it, stiff with age but still working. With each crank, the hum deepened, like the walls themselves were groaning in protest. Finally, with a hiss of pressure, the door unsealed. Cold air rushed out, so sharp it stung my eyes. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and I froze. The room wasn't like the others. No shelves, no journals, no photographs. Just rows of cages. Steel bars bolted into concrete, each about the size of a walk-in closet. Most of them were empty. But not all. In the nearest cage, on a wooden cot, lay a pile of clothes. At first I thought it was just rags, until I saw the shape. A jacket. Jeans. A pair of sneakers neatly placed under the cot like someone had taken them off carefully. The next cage had the same. Clothes. Shoes. A broken wristwatch. A pair of glasses. Personal belongings left behind as if the people who wore them had just vanished. I moved further in, heart pounding, flashlight shaking in my grip. My beam caught on the farthest cage, and that's when I almost dropped it. The cot there wasn't empty. There were scratch marks all over the concrete wall, deep grooves like fingernails dragged again and again until they bled. Words scrawled in black marker, smeared and frantic. He sees me. Not human. Don't trust the smiles. And in the corner, half buried under a blanket, was a tape recorder. I crouched down, my hands trembling as I pressed play. At first, silence. Then a voice, shaky, terrified. Not my dad's. A woman's. He watches us. He says we're not supposed to be here. He writes everything down. He says he's saving people. But I don't feel saved. Please, if anyone ever finds this, don't believe him. He's not protecting you. He's collecting us. The recording cut off with a burst of static. I stumbled back, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. The cages. The clothes. The scratches. The voices. This wasn't a war. This wasn't protection. This was a prison. And my father hadn't just been watching people. He'd been keeping them. I staggered out of level 3 and slammed the vault door shut behind me. The clang echoed through the basement like a gunshot, the hum vibrating in my bones. My hands were slick with sweat, my flashlight beam jerking across the walls as I backed away. The cages. The scratches. The woman's voice on that tape. My dad hadn't been fighting a war. He hadn't been saving anyone. He'd been locking people away until they disappeared, until nothing was left but clothes and notes and names crossed out in red ink. But in his mind? In his twisted, paranoid mind? He was a soldier. A protector. And now, he expected me to carry on the mission. I stumbled back upstairs, slamming the basement door, fumbling with the lock until my hands went numb. Mom was still in the living room, staring at the muted TV, but when she really saw me, pale and shaking, her lips trembled. You found it, she whispered. Not a question. A statement. I wanted to scream at her. To ask how long she'd known. If she'd heard the screams from below. If she pretended not to see the boxes, the files, the people who suddenly vanished. But all I could do was choke out, "Why didn't you stop him?" Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head slowly. You think I didn't try? You think I didn't beg him to stop? But he always said, it was for you. For us. And if I betrayed him, her voice broke. I thought he'd put me down there too. Her words cut through me like glass. My father hadn't just imprisoned strangers. He'd imprisoned her. In fear. In silence. In complicity. That night I couldn't stay in the house. Couldn't breathe the same air. I drove until dawn, winding through empty highways, my father's voice from the cassette replaying over and over in my head. Keep the journal alive. Or let them win. I thought about the cages. The clothes. The scratches on the walls. I thought about the names marked removed. And I thought about the words scrawled on my own file, if not, remove. He'd been preparing me to inherit his sickness. And if I didn't? He was ready to erase me too. The choice clawed at me. Destroy it all, the journals, the tapes, the files, and free myself from his legacy? Or keep it, study it, and risk becoming exactly what he was? In the end, I made my decision. I went back. I carried every journal, every tape, every file box up the stairs. I piled them in the yard. And one by one, I set them on fire. The flames crackled high into the night, the smoke curling into the sky as if it carried the ghosts of every person he caged. The hum from below faded with each page that turned to ash, until finally, silence. Mom watched from the porch, her face streaked with tears, but she didn't try to stop me. Maybe she wanted it gone too. When the last box burned down to blackened scraps, I felt something I hadn't in years, air in my lungs that didn't taste like fear. But here's the thing. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, I swear I still hear it. That low hum. Faint, beneath the floor. Like the basement is still alive, waiting. And sometimes, God help me, I catch myself looking at strangers the way my father must have. Staring too long. Searching for something wrong in their smiles, their eyes, their movements. That's when I realize the truth. I can burn the journals. I can torch the files. I can lock the basement forever. But his voice? His rules? His paranoia? That will always be inside me. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to silence it.